You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Moser. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 12th of September. Militant Union set to destroy our education with two-pronged attack. Long-running heli service from Scilly Islands to be axed. Labour counsel to give back salary he has not earned in attendances. Coalition set to stop small crime compensation payments. Fiscal slippage leaves Spain with funding gap. Whilst Greece still struggles with debt, Golden Dawn clear the path ahead. 9/11. It was the 11th anniversary yesterday, lest we forget. Israel still pushing Washington over Iran. Thought for the day, political correctness and paybacks. And finally, beware low-flying cacti. UK news. The hardliner and militant TUC is set to cause mayhem for British schoolchildren and the education system in a two-pronged attack. First, this Marxist union's new manifesto will stop after-school sports, drama and even taking down or putting up children's artwork on the classroom wall. The second attack is that the TUC has backed coordinated strike action by public sector workers over pay and opened up a new front in the industrial confrontation with the government after last year's pensions dispute. This move was reported as the NUT and NASUWT, which are the two largest teaching unions and represent over 600,000 teachers, have set an indefinite work to rule protest from the 26th of September. This means in plain English that teachers will not supervise pupils during lunch breaks and will not be available to cover absent fellow teachers. A World at 8 reporter comments, "This shows the writing on the wall for the future of our children. The only thing these teachers are interested in is their salaries and their principles, that of spreading the Marxist word and deed. It will not affect the massive amount of immigrant children now in our schools, to whom education is a new toy, and Labour clones would never offend the newcomers." The average teacher today is a write-off. Many cannot speak proper English and are thoroughly indoctrinated into the ways of the Frankfurt School of Indoctrination and should be replaced. A long-running helicopter service which flies from the Scilly Isles to Cornwall is to be axed. The company that runs the service, which helps people with mobility problems, says the main factor is the cost in fuel and expenses along with falling passenger numbers, and a land dispute over the heliport with superstore chain Tesco. Holidaymakers love this fast trip across the sea to Scilly and back during the summer months. A resident of Scilly has said it won't be the same when the service is gone. A World at 8 writer commented, "You would have thought Tesco, with their millions, would come to the aid of its shoppers, wouldn't you?" A Labour council in Leicester, who has only been to one council meeting in 4 months, is expected to pay back the £3,500 he was given. Iqbal Desai said that he had not attended meetings because of personal reasons, but now has to attend a Labour meeting on the issue of his payback. One Labour councillor commented that he has to do the decent thing and pay it back, or at least part of it. The Lib Con coalition government is to slash small compensations for criminal injuries. So now, with the cuts to the amount of police patrolling the streets and the closure of many police stations throughout the UK, and no cuts to immigration, the hike in crime will escalate by the day. Only those suffering from serious crime injuries will be rewarded financial compensation. Police have claimed that 6,800 frontline jobs have been lost since the last general election. A World at 8 writer comments, "It is a pity this small compensation slash was not brought in for the murderers of Charlene Downes, who received a total of £250,000 between them for their trauma. It would just make claims higher from those who probably do not deserve it, and not the real victims of crime." Euronews. A widening fiscal gap, pressures from the business community and credit ratings agencies could mean that Spain is on the path to a full-blown bailout, reports from the EU have stated. The Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, is looking into whether the terms for a new ECB plan to bring down Madrid's borrowing costs if Spain seeks a bailout from the rescue fund are satisfactory, but said in a television interview on Monday that he still has not made a decision. Spain must raise 30 to 40 billion euros by the end of 2012. Greece is still struggling to uphold the promises to lenders who are propping up the country. Reuters have reported that the Greek Prime Minister Antonis Samaras will meet European Central Bank President Mario Draghi in Frankfurt today. Meanwhile in Greece, the Nationalist Party, the Golden Dawn, have gone and cleared up illegal immigrants from a market near Athens. Posing as police, they asked non-Greeks to produce papers of their legal right to be in the country. One stall, which was run by an illegal immigrant making money but not paying taxes, was chased out of the market and had all his illegal merchandise destroyed. One Golden Dawn MP commented, "No papers, over here illegally and working illegally. We did what Golden Dawn must do." World news. Yesterday marked the 11th anniversary of the worst Islamic terrorist attack in the world history. In New York, names were read out of the 2,983 people who were killed in New York, Washington and in Pennsylvania. But for the first time, politicians did not address the ceremony in New York. President Barack Obama said that the US had emerged even stronger from that day's death and horror. President Obama attended the ceremony at the Pentagon and Vice President Joe Biden spoke at Shanksville. The dispute between China and Tokyo over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea has started to escalate in the region. The two islands that are privately owned have received a purchase offer put forward by the Japanese. China is outraged, saying the islands are part of Chinese sovereignty and belong to China. Taiwan has also tried to make a claim on the islands. The Chinese government has sent 2 naval vessels to the region, which are being closely monitored by the Japanese Coast Guard. An Arab League mediator is to travel to Syria this week. He'll be meeting with President Assad to try and find a solution to the crisis. In the meantime, 20 of Assad's soldiers have been murdered by rebels in the city of Aleppo. The UN envoy, Lakhdar Brahimi, has said that it will be a mammoth task to stop the fighting in Syria, which has apparently killed hundreds over the last year and a half. Israel is still pushing Washington over action with Iran. However, the American government has said there is still plenty of time to come to a diplomatic solution over Iran's nuclear program. The Israelis say they want immediate action on Iran, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has laid down the gauntlet, saying the United States must draw a red line over the Iranians' nuclear project. A World Today reporter commented, "Poor old Netanyahu, it must be difficult living in knowledge that one of your neighbours wants to blast your country to kingdom come and is encouraged by other Muslim countries to help them do it." Breaking news. The US ambassador to Libya, J. Christopher Stevens, and 3 other Americans were killed in a deadly attack on the US consulate in the eastern city of Benghazi. President Obama condemned the attack in a statement at the White House on Wednesday and vowed to bring the perpetrators to justice. It is rumoured the assault may have been planned by extremists and inspired by Al-Qaeda. The attack followed a protest at the US Embassy in Cairo over a low-budget anti-Muslim film made in the US, and it appears that this assault in Benghazi was yet another response to this film. 2 Marine anti-terrorism security teams have been sent to Libya to bump up security there. Thought for the day: political correctness and paybacks. Although I cannot comment specifically on the court proceedings in Fareham, Hampshire surrounding the Mrs. Walker case and her leaflets, I can and I will comment on the ridiculous effort on the part of the CPS and the Chief Constable of Hampshire to bully an old lady. It is quite clear that the British National Party are being targeted in this case, which never should have been brought to bear. There is a huge amount of crap being aired from 5 years ago that Mrs. Margaret Walker sent out. She was never prosecuted for this, but just given a verbal warning. You would never think it. The opposing counsel has not stopped in an attempt to blacken Margaret's name with these initial and up to now hidden leaflets. Now the opposing counsel is a Julian Knowles QC, and in case we are left in no doubt as to whom he owes his extremely liberal attitude to, it is of course because he hails from Cherie Blair's legal school of how to get money out of practically anything that moves company, Matrix. These are apparently the big boys of the legal beagles, and if Knowles is anything to go by, I would avoid employing anyone on principle who had anything to do with Mrs. Blair. On an aside, it is rumoured that when Blair was in number 10, she was called to Australia to raise money for a children's charity. I believe around £65,000 was raised, and she took £50,000 of it. for her after-dinner speech. So really all this talk about charities and immigrants getting their rights all depend on the state of the Blair pocket at that time. Suffice to say, on another point, Blair must be the only person to have started 2 illegal wars centred around the Middle East, and when leaving premiership promptly became, through United Morons, the Middle East Peace Envoy. But I digress. Now on to my 4th whole day at Fareham Court. I was thoroughly disgusted at the way opposing counsel led his skeleton statement. Not only did he bumble his way through 2 hours of repetitive stammering and page turning, but he centred his case on the 5-year-old leaflets sent out by Margaret, who was clearly going through an anti-Scottish phase and everything that was not English phase. However, her remarks on the state of the NHS and Scotland were pertinent. I would say she has improved greatly since then. Of course these letters proved manna from heaven for Julian, who simply went to town on his own little cloud. His climax was attained, however, by the second recent leaflet for which Margaret is being prosecuted. I believe he mentioned the last page where Margaret has highlighted the plight of very young girls who have been groomed and spread a liberal coating of red ink over that paragraph. Julian then decided, after badgering both Margaret and our British National Party press officer with the supposedly gory details of bloody knickers, to name it vaginal bleeding. At this point I gave up, especially when he tried to get a future or past psychic reading as to how or what the reaction was of the council members she sent it to. How many variations of "if you do not like it, put it in the bin" can you say? She sent out 500 of these leaflets, hand done and paid for in postage by herself. A labour of love, you might say. The police received 24 complaints back. That is, around 5% were offended. Tough. Julian Blair, because that is what I've named him, also harped on about the EU regulations and the Human Rights Act, and a long preamble about a lady who sent photos of fetuses through to chemists who supplied the morning after pill. We also had the local plod who had arrested Margaret in a dawn raid when she was in bed, and her son was also arrested, then released, as Margaret admitted and in fact yelled from her bed that it was her who sent the anti-Muslim grooming leaflets. This DC Plod Wilson, or Stumpy as I will call her, failed miserably in her research of what should have been the pivotal point of the reason behind sending out such literature, the case of Charlene Downes and her murder. Apparently Stumpy did not know of the case at all. The British National Party are involved because Margaret put the web address on this leaflet, but in fact, unnoticed by Julian Blair, if you put bnp.com you can get BNP Paribas or the Bangladeshi National Party. But the general view is that the court, the press and the Blairites are all desperately avoiding the issue that is the elephant in the room. The actual cases of Muslim underage sexual grooming that are just coming to light. They do not want to go there. It offends their image of multiculturalism and the Islamic faith. Margaret is not anti-Islam, but she is, along with me and many others, anti-Muslim grooming gangs, which are spreading south all the time. Poor old Chief Constable, he might be hoisted with his own petard in the future. What does it say about evil and men that do nothing? When Margaret Walker was being cross-examined, she gave as good as she got and brought up the subject of Mrs Downes and the general lack of sympathy Mrs Downes has received from the press and public, whilst this prosecutor was busy ascertaining how a few recipients of her leaflets felt when they had received them. The comparison between losing a daughter and getting some unwanted post is really hard to take even in this local provincial magistrates court. But I had the feeling, sitting in that courtroom, that we were watching a rather bad play with an assumed ending. It was all rigged, the whole kit and caboodle. Of the 3 magistrates, 2 were joined at the hip and obviously liberally inclined, and words fail me on the big guns of the prosecuting counsel, Julian B. The Madge themselves spent 2 hours this afternoon talking about it, and yet another date has been set for the final run of this farce. The point about fighting it is that Margaret thought she was doing the right thing, informing certain councils of the problems that have occurred further north and pointing them to the BNP site. Not that they could do anything, they couldn't. They were minor, to say the least, officials, and if they are upset by leaflets like that, they cannot be much good to anybody with problems. The CC, Chief Constable, cannot bring criminal proceedings, but can do ASBOs. Now, research has shown only 3 out of every 100 ASBOs asked for are ever turned down, so they are on a sure thing here. Julian is asking for a permanent ASBO, which would mean Margaret would virtually be under house arrest the rest of her life, with no communication to the outside world at all. She has abided by her interim ASBO and has no intention of doing any more leaflets, as she said. The British National Party and Pro-Fam have taken up the cudgels for Karen Downes, and indeed Karen came down to the first hearing and spent some time with Margaret discussing her daughter's murder. Julian tried to say that Karen Downes would be shocked by the leaflets, but of course she wasn't. Thank God for Mr Colcannon. He is Margaret's counsel and is superb. He lets Julian have his mumbles in court. Everyone deserves their 15 minutes, or in this case nearly 3 hours total of fame. I will of course let you listeners know the outcome after the 25th of September, but I think we all know where this is heading. The police are rather like whores. They hear the chink-chink of probable racism, plus the bonus of the British National Party, and they are in like flint. The outcome is probably already in the pipeline, and the Maggies are only bumping up the timeline because, more so in legal doings, time is money, but then that will suit Blair and Matrix, because the more time, the more money. We will have to wait and see. And finally, KSAZ TV of Phoenix reported that a couple from Arizona said their house was damaged when a 30-foot tall cactus on their property broke apart and pieces struck their home. Mr and Mrs Lindstrom of Mesa said that the Sakaro cactus broke apart Saturday morning and cost $3,000 to remove. 2 arms of the cactus hit the shed outside before it hit their house. Damage included a smashed computer and ripped out wiring for their television and cable TV. The main body of the cactus stayed upright by leaning against a telegraph pole. Lindstrom say that Friday's monsoon could have contributed to the cactus breaking apart. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.